To start things off, as August comes to an end, we acknowledge Black August. I'd also like to acknowledge the leaders of the Ferguson protests after the murder of Mike Brown on August 9th, 2014. Shortly thereafter, Darren Seals, DeAndre Joshua, Marshawn Carroll, Edward Crawford, and Amber Evans and Steve Masry were either found riddled with bullets or said to be addicts who overdosed by people who only benefit from their death. A moment of silence for those who had their lives taken for their resistance and for those taken by the state. Thank you.
Tonight, in honor of Black August and its importance in the modern day, we will be playing a 10-minute video of a tribute to Black August by a candidate and comrade from Texas, Larry W.
So thank you, comrades, for allowing me to speak on this topic of just the history of Black August and just a tribute to it. It really means a lot to me, especially that the party has allowed me to take on this great responsibility and also allowed me to write on this, which I'm very thankful of. So pretty much in this, especially in my article that I wrote, I touched on not only, of course, the basic history that we know of Black August concerning what happened in the Marion Courthouse in 1970 with the attempted liberation of George Jackson at the hands of his brother Jonathan Jackson and other comrades who had begun to realize what the prison industrial complex that we are fighting against still today was doing, especially in context of the Soledad brothers and the attempted railroading of not only them, but also Comrade George Jackson, but also just the history of August surrounding both Black repression and Black resistance as well. Of course, as we know in the history of August, many things of repression and resistance happened. Most infamously, in August of 1619, the first kidnapped Black comrades arrived in Virginia at the hands of English slave traders who had already begun to enrich themselves in the process of the Atlantic slave trade, which, of course, as we know, built up modern capitalism that we have today. You also had seen in the 1750s in South Carolina a group of Maroon comrades who were a community of free Black comrades who had often, escaped slavery and made up communities to help resist against slavery, had actually won a victory against the South Carolina government and militia that was sent in by the English to crush them. And most famously, in August of 21st on 1831, Comrade Nat Turner had led a slave rebellion in Hampton, Virginia, against the ruling class and the slaveocracy in Virginia, which lasted many days and of course sadly resulted in the state repression and crushing of the rebellion, um, which of course did succeed in its goal of motivating more enslaved people to realize that the ruling class is not invincible, that they are possible to be toppled, and that just motivated many other comrades. And then of course, most infamously, in August of 1791, in Santo Domingue, which later became Haiti, the enslaved people there, taking inspiration from what was going on in France at the time, had begun the long process of liberating themselves, in which became known as the Haitian Revolution, which saw the enslaved people not only fight against their enslavers, but fight against several empires, including the United States, England, France, and so many others. And so this goes to show not only how important August is, not only in liberating, prisoners in this prison industrial complex, but also in just recognizing the long history of struggle. and just how important it is. It's not, just something to, just look at and say, oh, well, this happened. No, this is, an ongoing process. Of course, as we know, being, Marxist, Leninist, or revolutionaries, or socialist, or communist, we recognize that things, of course, do not just happen for a reason. They happen because of dialectical materialism and historical materialism. And these are rooted, of course, in the great contradiction of capitalism, that capitalism, needs. As shown with the prison industrial complex and just the legacy of chattel slavery and others, needs especially black bodies to exploitate. And this is why, still today, just, 50 something years after the death of George Jackson and Jonathan Jackson, and 200 years of, resistance, we still see to this day many people, especially in the Black community, recognizing that Black August is very much significant. It's not just, something that comes around, but it's recognizing that we in the Black community are constantly under attack by the state, and that the state will continue to murder Black women and children, as shown with the fact that in Mississippi in June, we literally saw a 1 year old be murdered right in front of his mother. His one crime was just being Black. And then, of course, we saw in the case of Nolan Wells being found dead in and pretty much, a lake in Mississippi. And then, of course, Antonell Williams being shot 20 times by the reactionary fascist Austin police. And then, of course, in May, Kadir Skinner being, lynched by Wilmington police in Delaware. And this is, of course, something that we in the party are going to need, not only need, but have to address, because we are seeing the state taking out its contradictions and the frustration that it has, that it can no longer win. It cannot win the big battles anymore. It can't win in Iran. It can't win in Palestine. It can't win in the global south. So it's taking, its frustration out on the people, and especially on the most marginalized, which of course we recognize that Black comrades in the Black proletariat is in. And so this is why we are seeing the things that we're seeing. And this is why we must also recognize, just the long history of Black August, and of course recognize that the work is not done, that George Jackson's work is not done, that Nat Turner's work is not done, that Jonathan Jackson's work is not done, that all of these comrades, work is not done. And one particular thing I wanted to point out to, especially with connecting, the long struggle that we're seeing today, especially with the killing of youth, is one particular one that is very much near and dear to my heart, which is the murders of three Black Panther members at the hands of the Los Angeles Police Department in 1968. These were Tommy Lewis, Steve Bartholomew, and Robert Lawrence. And what made them important was they were the first of the members of the Los Angeles chapter to be murdered. And this, of course, sparked a massive repression done by the government in Los Angeles under Sam Yorty, in which they unloaded tons and tons of repression against the Black Panther Party. And of course, this would lead to, infamously, the next year in December, the Los Angeles Police Department creating the SWAT team to literally destroy the Black Panther Party. And what makes this still relevant today is that the Los Angeles Police Department is working with reactionary organizations and agencies like ICE willingly. And of course, as we know, in Los Angeles, last year we saw the murder of Keith Porter, which is still important today because the Los Angeles Police Department is still doing the things that they did in the 1960s, even before that, which is continuing to occupy the Black community, continuing to brutalize Black comrades, and continuingly just harming Black comrades. And we in Workers' World have a long history of, saying no to this and really standing up and saying, you will no longer brutalize our Black comrades. But especially now, we must continue that history, because more and more daily it is shown that not only are Black comrades paying with their lives, but Black youth are paying with their lives. And this must be important to us because Black youth are the future of the working class. They have, out of the working class, the most potential to become radicalized and revolutionized because, as I stated, in the piece I wrote about, due to the conditions that Black youth, like myself and others, live under, we become radicalized. We become radicalized by the fact that many of us can no longer, go to college because of the material conditions we are put under. We are radicalized because of the fact that we have seen or heard friends or family who have been either murdered or brutalized by the police departments. We've seen the state's full repression done against us, and even the cases we've seen lynchings done. And this is why we must draw the line in the sand and say no more. No more repression, no more any of this. And it's in the best interest of workers' world, not only in the best interest of workers' world, but in the best interest of the working class to say we will no longer let the state murder our Black comrades. We will rally, we will shut down cities, we will do anything to make them stop. And it is the only way to do this, not by passive resistance, as liberals or Dixiecrats would say, but by full-fledged confrontation and confronting the pigs on their level.
Thank you to Larry for sending in that incredible video. So our first speaker of the night will be Bill Sachs speaking on Cuba and Castro.
Evening, comrades. We've all been reading recently about the increased pressure, increased threats, increased attacks on Cuba, which has faced an economic and financial blockade, assassination attempts of their leaders, actual terrorist attacks in the country by mercenaries from Florida. And for over 60 years. And recently they have been stepped up. So there's now a fuel blockade and the actual threat of military intervention with aircraft carrier and naval groups surrounding the island to enforce the blockade. Cuba has faced some of the most serious sanctions and attacks than any other country. Perhaps maybe the Palestinians could, claim that. But why such a small island is claimed to be such a threat to the U.S.? We all know the answer. It's one word: socialism. And as Fidel used to say, it's a battle of ideas. We defend ourselves with ideas. And that idea, of course, is really a big threat to the U.S. That not only is it an idea, but Cuba has showed it in practicality. They've been able to start building, and with great success, a socialist system, what they call a socialist model, which has taken the country out of poverty and provided universal health care for free, nearly 100% literacy, etc. And of course, the principal architect of these ideas and this struggle and this fight for socialism, though with others, but the principal architect, of course, is Fidel Castro Ruz, who, and just this past week, on the 13th of August, was 100th anniversary of his birth. And in Cuba, there was a celebration and a colloquia, they called it, called Fidel, Legacy and the Future, which were over 1,500 people, participants, including more than 900 foreigners from 63 countries, including well over 100 from the US, braved travel restrictions, threats, possible arrest on return, harassment, fines. Yet over 1,500 people came and attended this conference. This is a 4-day colloquium honoring the life and the legacy of Fidel, with speakers from many countries. And the first speaker, of course, was President Miguel Diaz-Canel, who spoke for a long time and gave quite an eloquent speech about the history, about the condition, beginning with the conditions in Cuba before the revolution, and what the revolution has meant to the Cuban people since then. The tremendous poverty, illiteracy, disease. The economy was practically, literally owned by U.S. corporations, which have now been liberated and are owned by the state, by the people. I would recommend, if you got a chance, to read the entire speech. It was reprinted in Grandma, World newspaper. This month's print edition, on the front page, we have a long article by Comrade Monica about the legacy of Fidel, and I think it's very important. Diaz-Canel also spoke about Fidel's leadership, literally in battle, in the fight against terrorist counter-revolutionary attacks. And he was a military strategist. He studied the guerrilla warfare, the liberation struggles in China, Vietnam, and other countries. And in fact, when there was an invasion by mercenaries funded by the U.S. At Playa Girón, which the U.S. calls the Bay of Pigs, Fidel was in the lead tank that met the invasion. And so he demonstrated through action his leadership, and he was loved for that by the Cuban people and really by the people of the world. Diaz-Canel also spoke probably as one of the greatest contributions that Fidel made of his international solidarity and the Cuban people bond and ties to the struggles, liberation struggles in Latin America, in Asia and Vietnam, and in Africa in particular. Fidel, he always said that African blood runs through the Cuban people. And he took that seriously. And Cuban troops have been in many countries in Africa, including Southern Africa, where Cuban troops were instrumental in ending apartheid and liberating Southern Africa. I think there were other speakers as well. I think it's important to show the importance of international solidarity by the list of the speakers. And after Miguel Diaz-Canel spoke, a member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China spoke. Li Hai-Sing, he's from the International Department of the Central Committee and a Central Committee member. And he talked about the bonds between Cuba and China and the relations and how they work together, and mentioned, of course, that Cuba was the first country in Latin America to establish diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China. And they've had an embassy and they've had relations with China almost since the beginning. And more recently, China has stepped up its help and assistance to Cuba, mostly providing solar energy products, including solar panels, solar electric vehicles, batteries, etc. One of the largest delegations of U.S. people that were in Cuba for this conference came from the Venceremos Brigade, which of course has been fighting the travel blockade, as I've mentioned, for over 60 years. And they, despite the restrictions in traveling because of the shortage of fuel, the brigade was able to travel from their camp to the colloquium in electric buses manufactured in China. Cuba has started, because of the fuel shortage, they haven't been able to collect garbage in all the neighborhoods. Well, now China has donated a number of like mini bikes and tricycles that can pick up garbage electric. And now the neighborhoods are getting cleaned up that way. China has provided multiple solar parks, which of course Cuba, with all its sunlight, can take advantage of solar energy more than many countries. We visited a solar park when I was there recently, and just rows and rows of solar panel to deliver electricity to the community. And Cuba hopes to have 25% of all its energy provided by solar by 2030, and perhaps the whole country by 2050. And this is because of their relationship with China in particular, which was stressed and showed the importance of their relationship with China by having a member of the Central Committee speak second. After that, there was the president of Namibia spoke, and of course, emphasized the strong ties between Cuba and Africa, and actually gave credit to Cuba for assisting in the liberation of Southern Africa and the ending of apartheid. So, I mean, all in all, it was an excellent summary and celebration of what Cuba and what Fidel has meant to the world struggle, to the struggle for socialism, the anti-imperialist struggle against colonialism. Everybody, at least from people from the US who had feared coming back, what might happen, they all got back successfully. I think Sarah reported at the last meeting that a number of people were pulled aside at immigration, but they all got through. We had very strong multiple sessions preparing people to come back, what to say, what not to say, knowing that the group, that you travel as a collective, and that if one person is pulled aside, the entire group stays and waits for that person and waits for everybody to be released. And the government knows that. They're aware that there are large groups of people waiting and in support of the people pulled aside. And in fact, have tried to disperse us and failed. We refused until everybody is released. So the intimidation will continue, the threats will continue, and it's our job to do what we can here to end the blockade, to eliminate this threat, to get the US out of Guantanamo, which is on occupied Cuban land, and to take Cuba off the list of terrorist nations. There'll be activities this fall to do that during UN week in late September. Representatives from Cuba will be here making presentations at the UN. There'll also be a vote, the annual vote to end the blockade, which takes place in the General Assembly at the end of October. We mobilize activities, demonstrations, and we fill the UN gallery in support of Cuba. So all that is very important. It's also incumbent on us to be prepared for any contingency that might happen, and to not let fear of the government stop us from supporting Cuba and the Cuban Revolution. So, venceremos, comrades.
Thank you, Bill. Due to the target put on the backs of anti-fascist organizations back in Cuba, Venezuela, and Palestine, we have Sarah on the rights received over anti-imperialist solidarity and what to do if the FBI comes knocking at your door.
Comrades, first, it's good to be speaking after Bill describing how the Venceremos Brigade, with about 100 people coming back from Cuba, organized a collective act of resistance. Nobody leaves until everybody comes through. So they could stop 20 people, everybody waits, including those outside who come to greet them and those coming through. And it shows a kind of collective solidarity and standing up to repression that is essential in this period. Now, US government is more afraid of the movement and of the resistance than they have ever been. And we should really be acutely aware of that they are facing a disastrous situation in West Asia, where they have lost every functioning base in the whole entire Gulf region. That means a huge both jet and naval bases and all of that is no longer functioning. So what's their response to this? And they see a global resistance all over the world. They want to say that everyone here who is in solidarity with resistance in Cuba, Venezuela, in Iran, whether it's China or Yemen or Lebanon, and especially always Palestine, is somehow a terrorist network that they claim they're going to smash. Now, a little bit, it's like Trump saying every day how he's going to, absolutely destroy Iran, and then you find out the opposite is really happening. So there's a lot of talk, but we need to be aware of what's happening, because the House Ways and Means Committee issued some subpoenas to several organizations, including Breakthrough News, the People's Forum, Tricontinental Institute for Social Research, demanding that they turn over all communication, all membership lists, all financing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these organizations, of course, refuse. And that is right, it's correct. And we support it 100%. That everyone under attack, individuals or organizations, if they're targeted by the police state, we defend them, every organization. Any political differences within the movement are minor and irrelevant in the face of repression. Now, at the same time, though, a lot of these things are coordinated attacks. So there was the House Ways and Means Committee with their subpoenas, and then just the day after, on July 20th, the State Department issued a 100-page report calling Cuba the capital of 21st century communism, the center of global terrorism, et cetera, et cetera. And all of that was really an attempt to stop this huge wave of people who were going to Cuba to celebrate the Fidel centennial. Now, at the same time, the State Department, they issued a list of 43 different organizations. And now that included everyone from the mayors of New York City and LA, to the Amazon labor unions, to the National Lawyers Guild, the Venceremos Brigade, many organizations that we participate in, are members of, and have helped. National Network on Cuba, the entire Black Lives Matter movement, Code Pink, I could go on and on. DSA, so on. This is all supposedly what they define as a terrorist network. Now, this is just how wild, far-reaching, and utterly ridiculous and impossible for them to in any way back up. I mean, they're really saying now half of Congress, anyone they want to oppose, is part of some network. At the very same time, President Trump and Secretary of State Rubio convened what was called an international ministerial meeting on the resurgence of political terrorism, and they pulled in 66 countries to take part, saying that they were going to fight counterterrorism on a global scale, all carried out by the left, by revolutionary movements and by resistance organizations. Again, utterly preposterous. Anyone who's done an interview, attended a demonstration anywhere in the world now, supposedly as part of this fantastic terrorist network. So what does this show? It shows fear on their part, and they're trying to strategize what they can do to create fear here in the movement. And by refusing to respond to that, we play an important role. I mean, everyone in the movement who's standing up for this, the hundreds and hundreds of people, not only of the Venceremos Brigade, but all the other delegations from the US and around the world who went to Cuba, despite this, because these reports were coming out just days before people were due to board the planes. It showed they weren't backing down. But preparing for it is important, and knowing how to prepare. There also have been a number of FBI visits, particularly to new activists and young activists. And here again, it's important to respond in only one way, and we're going to do special classes on this. But to really say, I'll put you in touch with a lawyer. I have nothing to say. There's absolutely no reason to ever speak to the FBI about anything. And by the way, it's also true if you're coming back from a visit to any country in the world and you're pulled aside. You have to give your name and what country you're coming from. Nothing else. Nothing else. And it's the same thing if the FBI comes to anyone's home or job or family. You simply say, I'll have a lawyer be in touch with you. Period. Period. And we will arrange for that. So knowing that and knowing the period that we're in and their inability to back up what they're doing, and they're meeting more and more resistance, because while they can say and they can charge the entire movement, they have this big problem, and that is overwhelmingly people are against the war in Iran for sure, and are for Palestine, and deeply also for Cuba. Cuba provides more, health providers than the World Health Organization around the world, and that's deeply appreciated and understood. So the power of collective response and unified opposition in the face of all different attacks, this has historically been true, and we take the same approach today. We don't cooperate with the government, we don't respond, we don't talk to them, absolutely not. And at the same time, we know we have legal rights, and anyone who stopped or visited or held up when they're coming back from a visit or just a knock on the door at their job, there's only one response, and that is to notify us and we'll put you in touch immediately with the lawyer. So let's keep it going forward. This was true throughout the witch hunt in the US. This is not the 1950s, at a time when US imperialism was the strongest force in the entire world, a military that couldn't be opposed. And today, in every way, in every country, they are facing real defeats and setbacks. And we want to keep very much tuned into that. But also to always know that the oldest slogan of the workers' movement is an injury to one is an injury to all. So anyone who's under attack, we're there for them, we're supporting them, and we're defending each other at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We are about to start our discussion, but before we do, we have quite a few announcements, starting with this issue's paper. Keep going. Show it to the camera.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go.
Our party provides a monthly print issue of our paper at our meetings, rallies, and marches to provide our independent revolutionary news and analyses from the live distortions of the corporate-dominated media. 1/3 of our readers are incarcerated workers who receive free copies. Our papers have consistently sided with the workers and oppressed and struggled, large and small, against the billionaire ruling class and its monstrous repressive apparatus of all forms, such as the military. Since our first issue dated in 1959. This new issue features a tribute to the bicentennial birth of Fidel Castro, including excerpts of a speech honoring him by current Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel. There is also an article commemorating Black August written by Larry. Other articles include potential growing rank and file military resistance to deplorable conditions, the Puerto Rican Day Parade, US government subpoena targets, and the movement, and an editorial on gas profit and the war on Iran. If you want to help us get our class truth out with a pro-socialist, anti-capitalist, and anti-imperialist perspective, we encourage you to take 5 to 10 copies with you tonight and give to your coworkers and friends. But also, these newspapers will be distributed to Labor Day events around the country.
Okay, and we also have a reading group every other Friday over Zoom, including this Friday. I have to make that group. So the group will be going over chapter 10 and the conclusion of High Tech Low Pay by Sam Marcy and deciding on what to read next. If you'd like to be a part of the discussion, you are welcome to tune in tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Eastern or 2:30 p.m. Pacific.
And next Sunday, August 30th, you are welcome to join an international webinar titled China's National Unity versus US Social Hierarchy at 11 a.m. Eastern and 8 a.m. Pacific, focusing on China's new ethnic unity law and the Western reaction to it. If you'd rather watch with us at the office, we will have food and refreshments ready at 11 a.m.
And lastly, we have a brand new storage space right below the office and are in need of volunteers to move things from both this office and our previous storage spaces. So if you'd like to help out, please contact Tony Murphy. And since we need to pay for this space, here's Marcia, who will now give an update on this year's Summer Fund Drive. Marcia?
And I have my 5 papers here. So, we're, Workers World has a fund drive, spring summer fund drive that it's a 3-month fund drive and we're coming towards the end of it. We're raising $50,000 and we have pledges for over 80% of that. So, everything that you see here, everything that we do is paid for by the money that we contribute. And I was thinking, you know, and hearing the talks tonight, the tremendous talk by Comrade Larry in Texas on Black August. And I just looked at when he said the work is not done. You know, this is about continuing the struggle and hearing about Fidel and the speech by Diaz-Canel. I think that it's on our workers.org site. And as we say, the tribute to Fidel, venceremos, we will win. The optimism, even that we will be able to raise the money that we need. I mean, this is us. We're not rich. None of us. We're a working class party. And there's, you know, as there is in the working class, there's big differences. There's differences, you know, of how much each of us can contribute. but every contribution is a show of confidence and solidarity, and every contribution comes together to that we've been able to have pledges of 80% of that amount so far of this money that we need to be able to pay for this office and everything in it, to be able to pay for this space that we're renting downstairs and the storage spaces that we have been renting that we need to consolidate here. And to pay for the paper, which today we had a whole crew here that was mailing it out around the country. And as Janine said, mailing it to prisons around the country. So that's really, we have a Venmo at Workers World. We also have where you can give by credit card. It's a tiny URL, Fund Hype Drive. So you can give a one-time, you can set up to give a monthly on it. And Bill's gonna start handing around a bucket to be able to collect cash here tonight, because we need the cash also. So that's for the work that, that's the other thing too, Fidel. Fidel was looking at the global, keeping for socialism in Cuba, but looking at the global working class for socialism. And that's what Workers' Will Party is about, is looking beyond even the immediate things that we see, that we have our eye on the global working class struggle for socialism. So, venceremos.
And now the floor is open for discussion of stage topics. If you're here, just raise your hand and I'll add you to the stat. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to say something, just comment stat and we'll add you. Who wants to start us off? Oh, Monica.
Okay, so, great. Okay. Thank you, comrades. This is such a great meeting. I wanted to say one short thing about Black August, and then a little bit more about Fidel and his legacy. The one thing about Black August, and I thought Larry gave a great sort of overview of it, is that it's so much more to it, because so much especially happened in August in terms of, Black liberation struggle, historically and also now. And the one thing I wanted to say about it is that following the assassination or the execution of George Jackson on August 21st, 1971, it's important to read his works, especially Blood in My Eye. He was a Marxist-Leninist. He was a communist, and he was also a leader of the Black Panther Party. He was Huey P. Newton, one of the co-founders of the Black Panther Party, gave a eulogy, a very moving eulogy to George Jackson, during his funeral. And coming out of the assassination of this very important, amazing person who spent like over half of his life, in prison, starting at the age of 17, is that it inspired probably the most important, and of course all rebellions are important, but this was so significant. The Attica Rebellion that happened in upstate New York. Because of his assassination, the incarcerated people there was very multinational. they carried out a hunger strike in the cafeteria because of what happened to George Jackson, that led to the rebellion that happened over 4 to 5 days from September 9th through the 13th. And Comrade Larry Holmes, characterized it as the Paris Commune, of rebellions in the United States amongst prisoners. And of course, we all know that the rebellion was drowned in blood, by Rockefeller's, goons at the time. But really, the legacy remains today. It lives on today. The 26 demands that they made, these incredible, brave, heroic people, Black, Latina, and white, who came together, against the repressive state apparatus and just made their demands to the world, including amnesty to Cuba and to North Korea, and calling for a union, 8-hour a day. They saw themselves as workers. We need to study this rebellion. The anniversary is coming up next month. So that's what I wanted to say about, Black August and one of the most significant things that came out of Black August. And now I just want to switch over to Fidel. I had the honor of meeting Fidel Castro in June of 2000. And the reason why I wanted to raise that was to reflect, and Bill's report was so excellent, but to also reflect the fact that Fidel was all about solidarity, not just with the global South, Africa and Latin America, and the Caribbean and so forth, but with the global North as well. He saw the significance of the class struggle inside of the United States and other imperialist centers as well. And I just want to raise three important, actually, I want to go back in terms of why we were able to meet with Fidel. And it just wasn't me. It was, a couple, Comrade Gloria Ruback from Texas, who has been a leader against the death penalty, for 40 to 50 years. Pam Africa, who worked with Mamiya. Rosemary Mealy, who is a well-known Cuban activist, who wrote a very important book about Fidel and Malcolm X meeting back in 1960, 61, when Fidel came here and stayed in Harlem and met with Malcolm X. And the reason why we were invited to Cuba was because the Cubans had a series of forums and that they were presenting to the Cuban population. And one of those forums was on the U.S. prison industrial complex. And this is the main reason why we were invited to Cuba at that time, to present our view of what the prison industrial complex struggle was like in the United States. And the other reason too is that Fidel was very interested in the struggle of political prisoners here. And especially at that time, the struggle to free Mumia Abu-Jamal, and also to stop the execution of Shaka Sankofa or Gary Graham. It was an international case in Texas to stop the execution of someone whose innocence. Of course, we're against the death penalty, period. We're not for the death penalty for any poor or oppressed person in the United States, because it's coming from, the rich, it's coming from the ruling class. But when Fidel was in New York and spoke in Harlem, he talked about the case of Mumia. He talked about the case of Shaka Sankofa. And so he wanted us to talk to him about these cases. And then also, we all know that Cuba allowed us Assata Shakur, a very important leader in the Black liberation struggle, granted Assata political asylum when she was held in, New Jersey dungeons and accused of killing a state trooper, which was a lie. And so for almost 40 years, she spent in Cuba under political asylum. And again, Fidel was the leader of the country at this time until she unfortunately passed away this past September. And so anyway, and also Fidel helped to organize, the Cubans helped to organize a delegation of nurses and doctors to come to the United States when Hurricane Katrina happened in New Orleans. And they tried to organize 1,500 a medical brigade to come to New Orleans to aid, especially the Black community at the time that had been flooded out of the Ninth Ward because of the damage to the levees. And of course, the U.S. denied them visas to come to show their solidarity with the Black community and the people of New Orleans. So I just wanted to raise these examples of Fidel because, again, what Bill has said and what Marcia said about Fidel's concern about the global working class, it was the global working class. It was in the South and also in the North. And so this is his legacy, and we should continue to be inspired by his legacy. His ideas will live on for future generations, and we're very proud of our ongoing solidarity with the Cuban Revolution, and we will do everything we can to continue to fight against this inhumane blockade, and of course for the liberation of all humanity.
Yeah, and then also Nat Turner's was I think tomorrow, the 21st. And then Fred Hampton's birthday is on the 30th. If you haven't seen it, there's a great book, Marxism and Reparations. You can get it from workers.org. Should be required reading one day after the revolution. It'll be required reading in high schools and colleges. But the other thing which is coming up, which isn't really Black August, but it's important because of all the repression, is the execution of Sacco and Vanzetti. I won't go into a lot of those details, but if you see a picture of, there were tens of thousands of people in New York City protesting that execution, and it was a frame up during the Red Scare and all that kind of stuff. I also want to mention an article that appeared on Workers' World, but it's going to be really easy for people to miss it. And it's an interview with a French communist about the Chinese Communist Party concept of self-revolution. And it's Secretary Xi Jinping has defined self-resolution as a way for the CPC to break free from the historical cycle of decline. And it's a great inspiring article in terms of like that the Chinese are trying to be sure that the Communist Party there doesn't ossify in the same ways that have happened in other places. That's it. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to get on staff? Sarah?
Well, thank you, Janice, for the announcement of this event, which is not this Sunday, next Sunday. It's on the front page of Booker's Wall. It's a webinar, an international webinar on China. And even to figure out in terms of time zones, how to host a meeting from here that also fits for folks in Shanghai to be able to tune in and folks in London to be able to tune in on the West Coast and so on. But we're very proud of this event because it's something that we're organizing with several organizations, the International Manifesto Group and UNAC, United National Anti-War Coalition, and the Friends of Socialist China. And what we have on is really the former editor of the China Daily newspaper, speaking from Shanghai. That's a big deal, Chen Weihua. Also, Jacqueline Luckman from the Black Alliance for Peace, and Carlos Martinez from Friends of Socialist China. So we have and a number of other speakers. I don't want to give the whole list, but we really do want to encourage everyone to tune in and register for this webinar, to send it to other folks. But what we're going to do here is make it like a Sunday brunch for people who want to watch from here this program. It's really based on answering a whole propaganda slam against China. That's not unusual. It's what the US media does all the time. But it's important to answer it both from China and from here. And we don't often have an opportunity to do that in a kind of an international panel. As I say, both speakers from China from here, and even the event that we plan to host here on Sunday morning, our Sunday brunch, will be with the Black Alliance for Peace. So just having the kind of co-sponsors even that we're doing, we think it's a very helpful way of answering the propaganda of China. So to invite everybody, if you want a good place to come for, I don't know, we don't promise much more than coffee and bagels. I think it's not too elaborate a brunch, but it'll be politically, I think, a very interesting meeting. And if you can't come here for it, do tune in for it and send it to others. We think there are going to be hundreds and hundreds of people around the world who tune in. So thank you.
Is anyone else on staff? Okay. Is that it for everybody in the room? No final remarks? Okay. Would you like to sign us up?
Okay. I'll go with that.
Oh, okay. Ferdinand on staff?
Why not? Take advantage of the opportunity before the meeting's over. I just want to say that thank you everyone for coming today, especially stormy weather, and thank you to all of our speakers today. I think that especially given some of the demonstrations that I've been to in the past few weeks and focusing on Puerto Rico, especially recently, at a time when they are going through an extreme manufactured water and power crisis because of billionaire greed and imperialism and colonialism. You can draw a straight line from the South Bronx and East Harlem to San Juan and San Dulce and Bayamon, the kind of poverty and the kind of imperialistic destruction that you see of the community economically, and from there, you know, from the South, from New York to Puerto Rico, you can keep drawing that line to Cuba, to Venezuela, and eventually to Palestine. This is the the kind of, the continuum of violence of the imperialistic world powers and ruling class. And it's up to us to organize and to continue this fight. I think that we're going to absolutely have some major opportunities in the very near future, given just how much the system is collapsing around its own hubris and greed, and let's be honest, just madness at times. So, but that's the nature of fascism. So, thank you, everyone, and once again, it's meetings like this that give me hope, and I hope it gives all of you guys hope as well. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone in this room who came and everybody who logged in on Zoom. How many people logged in on Zoom? So 26 people who logged in on Zoom. This was a great discussion, and we will see you next month.